Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann. There, I think I got my computer set up correctly. Today, Tag Tuesday, I'm doing the semi-autobiographical tag. I was tagged by Sina over at Beating Around the Books, and the original tag was created by Mark over at Book Time with Elvis, so I will link to both of their tag videos below, so you should definitely go check those out, both awesome channels. And I'm not even organized because I need to be able to see my questions. Okay, the prompts. So prompt number 1, and all of these prompts will be down below with timestamps if you want to skip around. So prompt number 1 is, what was the #1 best-selling book, fiction and or nonfiction, on the day you were born, and have you read them? So I was able to find the fiction book on the day I was born, which was in April 1988. There was The Icarus Agenda by Robert Ludlum, which I haven't heard of, but I might have heard of Robert Ludlum. I don't know. I haven't read it. I was not able to find best-selling nonfiction book. So that's interesting. Question number 2, what are some books, series, or standalone that immediately spring to mind when you think of your childhood? So I feel like I've talked about this a little bit in a few other videos. So The Lord of the Rings is a big one, and The Hobbit, getting a little bit into later childhood, although my mom read those to my brother and I when we were pretty little, like first grade or so. And then all the books that everybody's talking about. I mean, Anne of Green Gables, The Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, Encyclopedia Brown. Oh, and gosh, some of my mom's old books and my grandma's books from when they were kids. So the whole Patty series, I don't know if anybody else knows those, but it's like Patty Goes to College, things like that. Those were great. Let's see, I'm trying to think if Redwall. Redwall was a big one. Really loved Redwall in that elementary school phase. Yeah, I think those are some of the, Roll of Thunder, Hear Me Cry by Mildred Taylor. I don't hear people talking about that one, but that was like a big, a big one in sort of the circles that I ran in. That was, I think, assigned reading in elementary school, and then again in middle school, and then I read all the sequels. I really loved that one. Okay, prompt number 3. School days are the best days of your life, apparently, but there you were forced to read some books you maybe wouldn't have chosen for yourself. Which did you enjoy? I actually did really like my school days, despite all the angst and heartbreak. And I loved it even at the time, like even though, I assume we're talking middle school and high school, even though there was a lot that was kind of crappy, like I was just really lucky. I had some really fantastic friends at school. We were all sort of misfits in various ways, but having that community was really everything, and so I loved going to school because that was the easiest way to see my friends. So school was great, and I also loved the assigned reading. I mean, English classes were amazing because I literally had to read books for homework, and I generally liked them all. Or even if I didn't particularly like a book, I'm like struggling to think of ones. Like Catcher in the Rye, it's like I didn't particularly like it necessarily, but I could still like appreciate the writing, and it was still sort of an enjoyable experience reading that book, even though the main character is, ugh. But yeah, so I liked a whole bunch of books. Pride and Prejudice was assigned reading, so I loved that. Harry Potter was assigned because it was assigned in my 6th grade creative literature class, which was sort of our English equivalent that year. And it had just come out in the US pretty recently. And so we got to read it for school. How awesome is that? Even though I don't agree with the author's recent public stances. That was a great 6th grade experience. Read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier for assigned reading, To Kill a Mockingbird, tons of Shakespeare plays that I loved. Heart of Darkness, that I think is fantastic for illustrating some really awful stuff. Great Expectations I loved. So yeah, really, really great stuff. Okay, prompt number 4. Were you independent or part of a pack at school? Did you join in the reading fads of the day or do your own thing? So I did mention I had a really great group of friends. And so we did often read together because we're really nerdy. So we would read together, we would share books, that sort of thing. So there were some things that did sort of hit fad status in that like all of us read them. So the Dragonlance books was one of those, at least the main trilogy. I think a lot of us read some Anne McCaffrey, The Clan of the Cave Bear, and the sequels for that series. Um, Through Wolf's Eyes by Jane Lindskold. Does anybody else know that? That series was great. So yeah, so we would find things, somebody would like it and then tell everybody else about it, and then some of us would read it. And then I had one, my best friend Ruth. She managed to read way more than I did, and so she was always lending me books, which was really fun. So um, yeah, and that's why I'm on BookTube now, is I'm recreating the experience of having lots of people that I like to talk about books with. Okay, prompt number 5. As you moved into your turbulent teens, can you remember your first experience encountering sex in a book? So it was that Clan of the Cave Bear series. And John over at Hey Y'all Listen Up also, I think just did this. No, was it this tag, John? You're probably going to watch this at some point, or was it a different tag? Anyway, you mentioned the sex in this book series. So yeah, reading that series like 14 through 20 maybe, it was definitely my first experience with some pretty explicit sex scenes. Okay, chapter 6, prompt 6. What were some of the first kinds of nonfiction you encountered? So encyclopedias and children's encyclopedias. So I will actually put up a couple pictures. So my parents have a complete set of the Encyclopedia Britannica. And so I remember sort of flipping through it, from a very young age, like early elementary school. And as we would start to do book reports and things, it was like, oh, let me go look up pandas in the encyclopedias. And so yeah, they still have that. So the Britannica. Then we also have a nice set of children's encyclopedias that I also remember sort of flipping through and reading bits of when I was also around that age. And then there's this whole series, which I'm sure lots of other millennial kids will recognize, maybe other generations too. I don't know how widespread they were, but these like illustrated things, like Eyewitness Illustrated books, and they're often pretty thin and they're often about a particular topic. It'll be like the Eyewitness Illustrated Book of Sharks or whatever. So I think those were my first nonfiction. Prompt 7, whose bookshelf was more fun to raid, mom's or dad? So I would say definitely mom's. My mom reads way more widely than my dad. She'll read absolutely anything, basically, but with a strong leaning toward historical fiction and romance and mysteries. But yeah, she has thousands of books in like every genre. So I would definitely raid her bookshelves more. My dad, I actually don't remember him really reading much when I was younger, and then he started to read a bit more once I was sort of in late high school and college, and I think that was sort of the balancing career and kids and house projects thing, once we could like drive ourselves around and like help out around the house more and stuff. Like he did occasionally take evenings to read. And he's funny because he won't read, like he definitely doesn't read every day by any means, but very frequently, it's like when he does pick up a book, then he'll just sit there and read it and you can't get anything out of him until the book is done. So he's definitely a reader, just in a different way than my mom and I are, who always have books around our person and pretty much read every day as much as possible. And then my dad definitely reads a lot more nonfiction, maybe exclusively nonfiction. So just lots of like science related stuff, history and politics stuff, which wasn't very attractive when I was a kid. Okay, prompt number 8, how diverse is your library? And then Mark has a whole list of like 28 or something, I didn't even count, different categories. So I will copy all those categories down below the prompts. And of those, so I was just going to note the ones that I don't think I have a book in. So I don't think I have business, finance, and law. I don't think I have calendars, diaries, and annuals. I'm not really sure what's meant by that. I don't think I have horror. I do have mystery and thriller, but I don't think I own any horror books. And I don't think I have any books about sports, hobbies, and games, although there's overlap because there's another category about like arts and crafts, and then there's another category about music, and both of those things are hobbies, and I do have books in those categories. So I don't know. But yeah, so of those like 28 or 30 or whatever number of categories it is, I'm missing potentially 4. So pretty darn diverse bookshelves. Okay, prompt number 9. What types of books do you find difficult to discuss? That's a good question. So, and there's a couple different ways. So on BookTube, I can find it difficult to talk about books that might be really controversial, and it's because I don't put a lot of prep into my videos. Maybe I should, but if I did, I wouldn't make videos. I mean, I don't, it's the balance of like, what do you have time for? And by making even rough videos, I'm already taking time away from my limited free time when I could be reading. So I don't really want to put more time into my videos at this stage in my life when I have a young child and I'm early career. Anyway, so I do sometimes find it difficult to discuss controversial topics on BookTube. It's not because I'm shy about talking about them. It's just that it's hard because even though BookTube is conversational, it still is a one-way format. It would be really, really difficult to go back and re-edit a video after it's been posted if someone, if I learn something new from a commenter, right, and realize that I said something in a way that doesn't reflect what I actually think or what I think evolved in the course of the conversation. So I think that can make me a little bit hesitant, a little bit more nervous to talk about sort of controversial topics. And by that, I mean things that edge into our highly charged American political sphere. I still get into them, and, I don't have a ton of followers, and so I haven't gotten into super hot water yet, but at some point I might. That'll be okay. And then in real life, I will talk about all that stuff. But yeah, books that really strike some deep emotional chords can be hard to talk about, because usually if I'm feeling really emotional about a book, it's because I have something in common with whatever emotional experience the characters are going through, and I'm not a very emotionally open person. And so there's a lot that people just don't know about me, even people who I think would be potentially quite hurt to realize that they don't know a lot of stuff about me. And so that can make it a bit hard to discuss books, because I don't want to go that personal with, most people in my life. So yeah, so I think that can be a bit difficult too, just like that line of how much are you opening up when you're discussing a book versus not. But there's always something that I can say about a book. So I don't know, maybe it's not that difficult. There's always something to say. Okay, prompt number 10. In what way do your life experiences and emotions shape your choice of reading? So absolutely, of course, everything affects my choice of reading. I'm not just like throwing a dart at my bookshelf and reading whatever it hits, and what's on my bookshelf is totally influenced by my life experiences and emotions. So yeah, and that's not to say that I only read books where I know I'm going to agree with a message that the author is saying, or where I know I'm going to like the main character, or where I know I'm going to identify with the main character. Like I do try to be, I do sort of intentionally use reading as a way to broaden my horizons, to a certain extent. uh, but yeah, so of course, yeah, my experience and emotions shape my choice of reading. And I guess the emotions is like, I don't really, I'm not a super mood reader, but of course there are times where it's like I'm just feeling down, like that makes me maybe not want to pick up some giant nonfiction tome or something that I'm working through, and maybe go with something a little more lighthearted, like a romance romp, or a new fantasy or something like that. Okay, prompt 11. In much the same way as our taste of food changes, so perhaps does our taste in books. How would you say your own reading tastes have evolved over the decades? Yeah, so when I was a kid, older kid getting into middle school and high school and college, I would say what I predominantly read was fantasy and sci-fi, a lot of epic fantasy, a lot of sci-fi. And I still really enjoy those things, but my sort of threshold for them has increased, if that makes sense. So like right now I'm really, really struggling in my reread of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. I'm stuck on Crown of Swords, and I've been stuck on Crown of Swords for like 6 months or something, because it is slow going. It is a slog. And so even though I love the series and I do overall like Jordan's writing, it's just like this is like it just doesn't it's not quite a good book, if that makes sense. Yeah, I just don't have the patience, I guess, anymore for fantasy that is more drawn out than it needs to be. And this is also my problem with Brandon Sanderson's Way of Kings, which I've been stuck in the middle of since January, because it just like I love world building. I really love world building. That's part of why I love the Wheel of Time so much. But at this point in my life, it's like if the actual story in your book could be told in like 200 pages, which is true of book 7 of Wheel of Time, and you're taking 1,000 to tell it, partly because you're just repeating lots of world details, like that's not really the place that I am in my life. So I would say that's changed. So less reliance on sci-fi and fantasy in my reading tastes. I've incorporated a lot more nonfiction the last several years than I did when I was a kid. So that's sort of been slowly evolving over the past 15, 20 years, I would say. All right, prompt 12. Unfortunately, we all feel down at certain times. Have you got a go-to book to raise you back up? Yeah, so Dragonlance, I would say, is a pretty go-to book for raising me back up. The Chronicles trilogy, the original trilogy, is just phenomenal. Sometimes a nice romance can get me raised back up. And then I have a guilty pleasure, which is the author, Anne Bishop, the Black Jewels trilogy, which I loved when I first read it when I was like 16. And I've since reread it a few times because it's a pretty depressing, emotional story, actually, but it like makes me feel better when I'm depressed and emotional, and it's not very good. So you can go look that up and judge me if you want. Okay, prompt number 13. If you have to choose one book or author to represent each decade of your life, who or what would they be? These should be books that are ones that you read in each decade, but aren't necessarily published in that decade. So I had expected this to be pretty difficult, and it actually ended up being somewhat easy. I'm saying, and I'm looking at my notes, and I didn't finish. That's why it was easy. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'll tell you the part that I did do. So for the first decade of my life, 0 to 10 years old, I'm going to go with Anne of Green Gables. As a redhead, my mom had the whole series, and so I grew up having those read to me, and then later reading them, and the combination of like it was a book about somebody who looked like me, and I didn't know anybody who looked like me. My brother and I are the only redheads, like sort of real vibrant redheads, and I'm not vibrant anymore, but I used to be. We don't look like my parents in terms of coloring, other than whiteness, but the extreme paleness, freckles, and red hair, and it's rare. So we knew one other redheaded kid growing up. Um, and it seems silly, like it's like how different is red hair from blonde, but like red hair is something you get bullied and teased about. And so I had that experience. And so in these books, there was a girl who looked like me and who struggled with some of the same things that I did about, I wouldn't say I never disliked my red hair. Like Anne doesn't like her red hair for a while in the books. So I never like disliked it, but at least just that experience of like, this is something that people won't stop pointing out about me. And like people just come up to me and touch my hair and like, ah. And so, yeah, so reading about a girl who looked like me, was nice. And then she also has this nice blend of like, she's a bookworm, she loves reading, but she also loves being outdoors and is super outdoors and active. And so those things were also just like who I was. And it's hard to find people like that in real life. And it's hard to find people like that in fiction that are just like totally embracing, or kids like that, I guess. I don't know. So yeah, so Anne of Green Gables really spoke to me. And then the second decade of my life, from 10 to 20, is Dragonlance. Dragonlance is just, I don't know, that's like the book of my life, I guess. But the reason why I chose Dragonlance for that second decade is because in retrospect, like I loved those books when I was that age. But in retrospect, it's like I was totally Tanis Half-Elven, like this angsty dude who like whines on and on about like not fitting in anywhere, but it's partly him kind of shooting himself in his own foot. Like, he's got great friends. Like, just stop being angsty, dude. I mean, he is a teenager. He's so angsty. And then like waffling about like what he wants to do and who he wants to be. And it's like, I get it, but like, oh my gosh, stop being a teenager, Tanis. So, Tanis Half-Elven. I will have to edit this video later to add in the third and fourth decades of my life. So, all right, folks, future Beth Ann here. I'm back with my third and fourth decade books. Okay, this was really hard because I feel like I was so many people during my 20s, and I'm now so many people during my 30s in ways that weren't really true in childhood somehow. So, in my third decade, so from like 20 to 29, I guess, I had a lot of options. So The Small Rain by Madeleine L'Engle was the first thing that came to mind, if anybody's heard of that. Then 2 books by Cormac McCarthy, Suttree and Blood Meridian. And then 2 science-y books, The Ecological Detective and The Song of the Dodo by David Quammen. And then a bunch of romance books, part romance, part erotica, I guess, by Kerrigan Byrne. So The Small Rain by Madeleine L'Engle is, I would call it literary fiction. You know, it's sort of the story of a young woman and what she goes through kind of in high school and through her 20s. And that book has always just really spoken to me. I read it for the first time in high school, but then I've reread it a few times since then. I'm not just, I don't know if it would make, you know, my best books list or something, but it's yeah, just definitely always spoken to me. And in particular, yeah, it's sort of that young adulthood in my 20s. And then The Ecological Detective and The Song of the Dodo were both pretty formative books that I read during my scientific graduate education. They weren't required, actually, The Ecological Detective was kind of required reading. I read it on the suggestion of one of the professors on my PhD committee for my qualifying exam. And The Ecological Detective is about sort of the philosophy behind how we think of the relationship between data and the models that we build to describe the data. So that was it's a really great book. And then The Song of the Dodo by David Quammen is sort of an exploration of biogeography. So why we see animals and evolutionary relationships and certain parts of ecology kind of in some parts of the world and not in others, and how that relationship sort of scales with the size and distance and of the lands that we're talking about. I think it was mostly about biogeography. Might have been about other things, but anyway, sort of like a natural history and popular science approach to describing science, but very beautifully done and very heavy on the science. So those were my options, and I did pick The Small Rain for Madeleine L'Engle. If I had to pick one, I think that might be sort of the most representative book of my 20s. Okay, and then my 30s, I'm only a little bit into that because I just turned 33, but I still already have several options. So one is, I'm forgetting the exact title, it's something like The Restoration and Conservation of Tallgrass Prairies by Chris Heltzer, who's a Nature Conservancy scientist. But I have turned into a restoration scientist of tallgrass prairies. Well, that's part of my scientific persona. But anyway, so I really enjoy that book. And another Cormac McCarthy, The Crossing. And then Eloquent Rage by Brittany Cooper and Braiding Sweetgrass. So again, we have a mix of a couple sort of more science-y options, the Prairies book and Braiding Sweetgrass, that have sort of been shaping my development as a scientist. And then Eloquent Rage, and then also The Crossing, which is weird because, I mean, Cormac McCarthy's books are about white dudes, but like they're, I don't know, maybe I'm a cynical person, but to me they're very reflective of, you know, sort of some part of kind of essential humanity. And so, yeah, The Crossing by Cormac McCarthy plus Eloquent Rage by Brittany Cooper, which is sort of a semi-autobiographical, or actually most entirely autobiographical collection of essays about what it's like to be a Black woman in America, are, yeah, kind of representative of like things that are shaping my political and social thinking and making me increasingly radical as I get older. So yeah, so I think of those options for the start of my fourth decade, I would pick Eloquent Rage by Brittany Cooper. Oh, and one other option for my fourth decade was going to be Toxic Ivory Towers by Ruth Enid Zambrana, which is an academic work about sort of the sociology of the lack of diversity and representation in academia and why that's perpetuated. And as someone who is an academic scientist, would like to continue working in academia, that is something that I think a lot about and increasingly want to put more of my energies and priorities into. So those are my options. But yeah, still Eloquent Rage by Brittany Cooper, I think, is a pretty formative book for my fourth decade. All right, moving on. Then prompt 14. So of course everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but how do you feel when people say reading is boring? And what would you say in defense of reading? So everybody who's done this tag, I have the same response. I think everybody has said, that's just sad. It just makes me feel sad when somebody says reading is boring. And I do think they're missing out on something, but I'm not going to tell them that. I mean, they don't know it. And they probably think I'm missing out on other stuff. So, to each their own. And what would I say in defense of reading? So I'm not really going to say anything in defense of reading. I mean, especially if it's another adult, it's like nothing's stopping you from going out and picking up a book. So you've probably done that. So I don't know. If it's somebody who's saying like, I wish I could read more, then I might sort of have a fun conversation about like, what do they like and what are they interested in, and sort of explore that with them. But, in general, we all do different hobbies. Okay, prompt number 15, wrapping up. This is a long video for me. What was the #1 selling book on the day of your most recent birthday, fiction and or nonfiction, and have you read them? So I have not read them, spoiler alert. So in fiction, the top in April, around April 10th of 2021, whatever year it is, was a Kristen Hanna book, The Four Winds. And then in nonfiction, it was The Codebreaker by Walter Isaacson. And I actually do have some interest in that Codebreaker book because I looked it up briefly doing research for this tag, and it's about a recent Nobel Prize winner in biology, and it's about, and she's a woman, and it's about genetics and sort of the science of our future and stuff. And so I think that actually sounded really cool maybe, so I might read that. I don't have much interest in Kristen Hanna. I'm like the only person on BookTube. I read... what's that really famous one, like The Nightingale or like whatever? I read it on Kindle a few years ago, I think shortly after it came out, and I thought it was pretty badly written, honestly. I thought it was kind of boring and trite. So you can stone me now. It's okay. Yeah, so I'm the only person that didn't like that book, I guess. And yeah, I don't really have any interest in picking up her other ones. If anybody watching this video was lukewarm or didn't like that book and has since read a Kristen Hanna book and found it to be better, then I might be interested. Okay. Anyway, I think that's a wrap. I'm going to tag Sneha at Sneha's Tomes. She's a fairly new channel, only has about 60 subscribers, but I've been really enjoying her content, so go check her out. And then Jeremy Fee. And Rob over at Rob is Doing Things. So I think I tried to do my homework and make sure none of you had done this tag already, and I hope that's true, but if you have, feel free to ignore this. And if you haven't, I would love to see your answers. So thank you for watching this. If you stuck around, and if you're not subscribed already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and I will see you all in the next video. Thanks. Bye.